Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Dan McQuillan is here from Broadcast Bionics. We're going to be talking about how to make She Who Won't Be Named show up in front of your disc jockey. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Telos Alliance and the ZipStream 9X2 processing and streaming software. Choose from hardware and software solutions for your online transmissions and stream like you mean it. From BSW, Broadcast Supply Worldwide, where the very sporting specials are on right now. Get a great deal on a sports broadcasting package and sound better than ever. And by Lavo, providing seamless integration of your work processes and the uncomplicated operation of complex technology. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host, along with Dan McQuillan. Dan and I are both at the headquarters for Broadcast Bionics in the UK. This is the show, This Week in Radio Tech, where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. And, you know, it's getting to where the light bulb at the top of the tower looks more and more like that white box over, that white cylinder. We'll be talking about what Dan and his company can make Alexa do for your radio station and how that is going to improve the way listeners interact with studio. But along with us from his, maybe he's in his usual lair, undisclosed location. Is that how I address emails to you, Chris? Chris Tobin at undisclosed.location.
I think I might just do that. That sounds like fun. I'm in Newark, New Jersey. I'm at a voice booth, and today it's not this undisclosed, but again, it's nondescript looking.
Nondescript. Undisclosed, nondescript location. So this is This Week in Radio Tech, and we're going to talk about some cool stuff that is making radio better, a lot better. And Dan's going to share a lot of his philosophy on that and tell us how some tools that are being developed can help make that philosophy come true. So that's all coming up. But let's thank our sponsor, our friends at BSW USA. That's Broadcast Supply Worldwide at bswusa.com. They have this month some very sporting specials going on where you can save up to 42% during their very sporting sale. Act fast because the sale does end soon. One thing you can pre-order, or you can get one. I think they're shipping now. Yeah, it is shipping now. It's the new powerful Comrex Access NX. Now that's a revolutionary redesign of their popular IP audio codec. It gives you faster processing, automatic error correction. That's a big deal. A convenient, intuitive touchscreen, and a whole lot more. And it is shipping right now. Now, here's another deal. I've got these headsets. These are the Audio-Technica BPHS-1 headsets. You get 3 of them for the price of 2. Well, that's like getting one free. The BPHS's mic delivers focused voice reproduction, while its closed back ear cup seals out background noise. Does a great job of that. Chris Tobin and I have used that at the NAB show where it was noisy, and it worked just great for us. We have it ready to go with the installed XLR and 1/4-inch connectors. 3 for the price of 2. And hurry, that sale ends soon. Also, if you need an amazing FM receiver, you can get a $300 instant rebate on the Innovonics Aaron 655. Now, this is a new receiver that accepts FM, and it also listens to HD 1 through 8 program sources for rebroadcast. And it also, of course, supports analog, AES digital, and streaming outputs. Just enter the promo code AARN at checkout. You ought to check this thing out, and go ahead and write that down right now so you don't forget it. AARON, Aaron. Enter that code at checkout, and bam, you will have that. The last thing I want to mention is the HDV mixer. This is sports video for radio. They have a sports package here. You can grow your audience and your revenue with the HDV mixer sports video package. Now, what it does is it seamlessly integrates video from 2 cameras, lower thirds, graphics, and a lot more while offering live streaming to social media. Contact BSW USA for your special low price on the special package for doing your high school and college sports games. Now that the sports season is getting started, you can get that in and have your next game. You can even have it this Friday night on streaming video. Pretty amazing deals from BSWUSA.com at their very sporting sale. Check it out now. And here's something else cool about BSW. When you order from them, and if you need something right away, their big warehouse is right next door to the Columbus, Ohio airport. That is a big hub for UPS. So if you need something overnight, order it by 7 p.m. Eastern time, from BSW USA. Specify that you want it overnight or 2-day, whatever you want, and they will package it up, box it up, and get it over to UPS that night. So you can have it in your hands the next day if one-day service is available in your area. There's a few areas where it's not, but most everywhere it is. BSWUSA.com. Thanks a lot for their sponsorship of This Week in Radio Tech. All right, so back here in the UK, Kirk and Dan. And well, Dan, you and I have been really exchanging ideas all day, mostly from you to me. You've got these incredible ideas about engaging audiences really thoroughly with broadcast. Talk to me a little bit about, where broadcasting kind of went into a lull in terms of audience engagement, and how are you bringing that back?
Yeah, I mean, we got involved, first of all, when we started to kind of reinvent the talk show platform and how we were going to get listeners involved via both telephony and then SMS. And then I guess some people think that because what we do might involve social media, it might involve video, that really we're not about radio. And the answer is actually we are, as you can see, a radio technology company. We deal with a great deal of radio hardware and software, but we are passionate about the art and craft of radio. That storytelling, that immediacy, that intimacy is just a huge part of what we believe is radio's history and will be radio's future. So the technology we're going to show you today is not about turning radio into some internet experience. It's not all about social media. It's about really honoring the art and craft of radio, the best of the history of radio, and then putting that into these new platforms, equipping it for a new generation of listeners, making it shareable, making it searchable, making it discoverable. So I hope this will excite a radio audience and radio technologists to really consider how we can extend radio's reach, to bring it to a new generation, to fit it for the new platforms which will really allow it to be shared and discovered. So this is absolutely not supposed to replace radio, but to celebrate what's good about radio, to enhance your content by bringing in new sources of material from outside, and hopefully extend the reach by making it shareable and discoverable to new audiences.
It seems like several years ago when I first met you guys, you were making, and you still do, make the very best call screening software, which allows the talent to know something about the caller before the talent talks to the caller. And so you can have notes about this. You can find out, have a database, quickly find out what else this caller has done with your station. But then that grew into some social interaction where you had, I believe, some social intelligence or some emotional intelligence about tweets and posts about your station.
Yeah? Exactly. So we started doing talk show software and controlling Telos products and other SIP phone devices and so on. And again, we have to stress the listener interaction, getting their voice, getting that authentic moment when a listener's voice breaks and maybe they're about to cry or maybe they're going to tell their own story. That is still the gold standard of listener interaction. Mm-hmm. We do still want to encourage people to call the stations. But what we were discovering is increasingly that's just not the culture. That's not just the expectation. So we were seeing a huge increase in the amount of interaction initially by text message and email, and now mostly via tweets and posts on Facebook page. So what we discovered is there was no proper piece of broadcast equipment for doing that. A lot of radio stations, people would bring their mobile phone from home. Sure. They'd bring their iPad. They were struggling to keep up with where the audience was going.
Okay.
So we thought, we need to actually integrate that into Phonebox, into our talk show handling system. But we wanted to do that in a way which was specifically designed to help broadcasters. So, when you're looking at social media, it needs to be as fluid as looking at it on an iPad, but it needs to be as flexible as allowing you to, to understand how frequently that person's messaged before, whether there's a problem with that content or that message. We need to make sure that we're connected to all the other devices. So if I start playing an Ed Sheeran song, we'll intelligently go away and find social media from Ed Sheeran. So it's like having a smart producer in the studio, which is able to listen to all of those voices and sources along with you.
So we'll take a closer look at that in a few minutes. But you've also, a few years ago, you began integrating video. And I thought that this was simply for streaming your morning show, your breakfast show, as you guys call it here. So people could take part in that or could watch it live. But I think through some research and finding out how people behave, just streaming your show is not really the focus where you think broadcasters need to be.
So, I've been involved in Virgin Radio, visualizing, putting it onto both television and a live stream 20-something years ago. Pioneering stuff, but, even with a great breakfast talent who was both a television and a radio celebrity, it really didn't get any traction or any numbers. It just wasn't an exciting watch. And that had kind of burned me a little bit for the whole idea of visualization. Then when we started doing serious social media for radio, what we realized is that people didn't want bad television, but what they wanted was shareable radio. And to
okay, because you're right. I do think of radio streaming as kind of bad television.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit more interesting than the audio. But they don't want bad television, but they do want shareable.
So we put pictures onto radio, not to turn it into television, but to make radio shareable. Think about it. There just is no real habitat or habit for sharing audio-only content on the platforms we all share on. Facebook, Twitter, as we said earlier, when did you last do a Google search and the answer came back as audio? It just doesn't happen. When were you last going through YouTube or flicking through your Facebook timeline and consume something that was pure audio? So we put pictures on in order to fit radio's best content. And we're talking about classic radio content. And we'll talk in a minute about how we have millions of shares and likes on a middle-aged man in a room talking to himself, close up when he's speaking, wide shot when the caller is speaking. This is 90-year-old radio content, but it's finding millions of fans and followers. Why? Because the content is emotive, because the information that they're talking about is something that people really have a passion about sharing. So this is about radio's best content with video associated with it and building it into the workflow of radio. So we walk into this. I know this is our test area, so it looks a little bit unlike most radio studios, but you walk into a radio studio, you open the fader on the console, and automatically the cameras start recording. Automatically they start speaking at whoever's talking. We close the fader, and we can instantly just share that clip directly to Facebook, to YouTube. We can tweet about it. While we're talking, I can just live stream on here and send it straight to YouTube Live, to Facebook Live, to Periscope, as simply as that.
So you don't need a social media director in the control room. The disc jockey, the talent, the talent sidekick can do what you just did. Push two buttons and it's live stream.
You open the faders, and if you have some celebrity in the studio with you, you can decide. So yes, live streaming does work on web pages and mobile apps, but it doesn't really get enormous traction. What gets the best traction is to record the clips of the best of your program and share those socially. And where you have a celebrity guest, where you have a special feature, or maybe a contest or something exciting which is happening, then those moments, maybe between 4 minutes and 15 minutes of content, then you put that specific segment out to YouTube Live or Periscope or Facebook Live. And we can get, Chris Moores was on with Ed Sheeran, and Ed tweeted the link to the Facebook Live post, and they had 675,000 people watching that stream. Probably many times the audience actually on AM and DAB in the UK where they're being transmitted. But that's because people who are engaging around that specific moment, around that specific content, are sharing it to the audience that they know is going to be excited by that content.
I'm going to want Chris Tobin to chime in here for a minute, but on this concept, because Chris gets this, and I think he can add to the conversation. But you and I were talking earlier about the notion of, okay, if a radio station puts something out and says, this is good, okay, you're probably hitting your P1s anyway, the people who listen all the time anyway. But if you get some of your listeners to repost that saying, hey, here's something I found that's cool. Friends, that's who you're talking to when you repost it. Friends, here's something I think you would like. I liked it. You might like it too. Now, you had a name for that kind of marketing, that kind of pushing out.
So we have a specific targeted form of that we call vectoring. But the whole thing is that's about that moment where, radio is, and you'll see some ways that we help you to react to radio, but radio is very emotionally engaging. People listen to the radio and they get emotionally connected. They get angry, they get sad, they get excited, they start laughing. And so the way that social media works is people do not reward your brand by sharing your content. People reward their friends when they share your content. So I have an emotional connection with your content, and I want my friends to share that. If I got excited, I want to share that excitement. I want to show, look, I found this cool thing. I want you to enjoy it too. This made me angry or frustrated. Look, I heard this. I want you to have that same visceral reaction. So this is not about people rewarding your brand. This is about people rewarding their friends with your content and introducing them to that same experience. And it works really well because it's peer recommended. It's not, some of our stations have 2, 3, 4 million follows and likes on their Facebook page. They can post content and reach a large audience.
Right.
But what they can also do is use their audience to reach more people in a particular area. So we spoke earlier on, Kirk, you might phone in. Q107 is our radio station that we're going to talk about today. So we're sat here in Q107. You call into the show. The computer is automatically recording the video of what's going on. It's recording your call. Afterwards, we can send you a link. The screen has got your mobile number, we can send you a text. They've got your Twitter handle, we can send you a DM, or they've got your Facebook, and we can send you a message. We send you a link to that content. And then, being a vain person, the first thing you're going to do is send that link on to all your friends and say, hey, I was on the radio this morning.
Yeah. So if I called a station and they recorded it, you're exactly right. That if they send it to me because they know who I am, and I'm naturally going to share that enthusiastically. Yeah,
so that's what we call vectoring. So,
Vectoring.
Virtually every piece of content on radio, I believe, is vectorable. So I have that call of you. I could put that on my Facebook page, and I could reach 2.8 million people who don't care about you. Yeah. So that's not a very good use of that piece of content.
Right.
I can give that piece of content to you, and you know the 50, 100, 500,000 people who will actually react to and be interested and intrigued by that content.
Yeah.
So now I've used you as a vector to say, okay, I have this piece of information. I could put it over here. Yeah. If it's Ed Sheeran's trousers catching fire, I might put it here, and it will find a general audience.
Right,
if it's
a general audience.
Your call, or we read out your message, then I give the content to you, and you go and find the specific audience.
So we're talking marketing here, but this is we've been talking. This is where radio either needs to go, or one great place for it to go to be more relevant all day long, not just during the breakfast show, not just during the live stream, and to make radio differentiated from Spotify. Which is not going to do this for you.
Exactly. There's plenty of audio platforms out there now, but radio has that curated instinct. It has that concept that there's somebody there that's listening, and it has this ability to create strong emotional responses, and people are then looking to engage with it. And what social allows us to do as broadcasters is to not use the audience. They're only going to do it if they're engaged around the content. They're only going to do it to reward their friends, not us. But previously, you had that driveway moment. You would drive to work or drive home, and you're listening to the radio, and you can't switch it off because there's that crack in the person's voice, and you know that they're about to choke up and start to cry. There's that talk show caller who you either rabidly agree with or are frantically against, but you're just incensed by, and you have to get to the end of it. And then historically, there was nothing you could do about that because the moment had gone, and maybe you could talk about it. Now, the habit for most people is to want to share that and pass it on to their friends. So it would be foolish of us as broadcasters not to try to put the content in people's hands and allow them to sate that frustration and spread our content for us. The way we have to do that is to put the pictures on it and to make it easily shareable.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, years ago, I made a call into a famous station, WLS in Chicago, and they let me intro a record, right? And I was almost home in the car. I called them from my brand new cell phone back in, 1990 or something. And I ran home, and I got there just in time for them to play it. They recorded it, and I recorded on cassette. Now, if Facebook had existed back then, oh my goodness, I would have shared that. And of course, if they would have sent it to me, I would have shared it, with all my, look, I was on WLS. Chris Tobin, what are your thoughts on this notion of vectoring, or getting, helping your audience members share what they're excited about?
Oh, Dan is spot on. I mean, if you think about it, back in the day when you had Arbitron Diaries, it was the phrase that pays. It's the Thursday morning dollars. You did everything you could to get your audience to stay with you so that you engage them in the content you had. Fast forward to today, and now you can be with them in their pocket. And Dan's absolutely right. The vectoring approach, as he calls it, it makes total sense. And curating what radio does is even better. I mean, Spotify, Pandora, all of them are great music sources, but that's about it. As Rick Sklar once said in his book, Rockin' America, we all played the same music in New York City on those great radio stations, but what we played between the songs was made the difference. That's why WABC was number one. Same thing now. Today, you can be number one with your audience and however you choose with the content by, in this case, with Broadcast Bionics product and vectoring. You now have right there in their pocket, with the little guy here, this little guy. So I think it's great. I'm looking forward to seeing more of this happening.
Well, we're going to go through a technical demonstration in a few minutes. We've got this, I got to say, Amazon Echo right here.
I'm going to mute it so she doesn't, otherwise she'll respond to everything we do.
But of course, our whole audience, some of them are listening with an Echo in their room. But
you might want to mute it for this next bit, because we are going to speak to she who shall not be named.
Quite a bit, actually, quite a bit. So just coming on the radar in the last few months has been the notion of Alexa skills, or Amazon Echo skills. And there's been a kind of a land rush to claim a skill for your radio station. Yes. And that's fine. But you have an interesting addition to the skill that doesn't require naming the radio station once you've got the radio station going, right?
Yes. So we always come at things, we always start where most other technology or other ideas leave off. So what we noticed was that these things, all smart speakers, so we have Google Home, we have the Amazon Alexa, and we soon will have the Home Pod from Apple, and others I'm sure will follow, have been invading people's homes at an alarming rate. Because initially we looked at it and we thought, maybe this will be a novelty, maybe people won't really take to it. But most people have found some use for these appliances in their home, controlling their central heating, controlling their lighting, asking for smooth jazz at strange times of the day and night. And I really realized the significance of these when some of my staff with younger children were saying their kids are just yelling at Alexa, as if she's ubiquitous and omnipotent. So they'll be sat in the car and the child is shouting, Alexa, what time is it? And it just doesn't work. But this has become a total natural expectation. The iPad generation who, from age 2 are able to swipe and click and pinch zoom and so on, have immediately taken to this. So
my 7-year-old son he loves all the music from the movie Trolls. So all the time we're in the kitchen, he's saying, Alexa, play the soundtrack from Trolls. And they start dancing. He loves it. He gets it. And he's 7 years old. Yep. I mean, it's like when I was 7, well, besides eating mud pies, I may have been introduced to a transistor radio. That was my Alexa at 7 years old. So yeah, these are moving up fast.
So these are becoming important, I think, in 2 ways in our homes. Number one, they're changing the space, the role and the nature of audio consumption in our homes.
Yeah.
The great news for radio stations is people with these kind of smart speakers listen to more radio than they did before, because it makes it easier to access a wide range of kind of radio services.
I just bought a second one. Our main one's in the kitchen. Sometimes I'm up there having lunch and I will call up one of my radio stations. I don't live anywhere near my radio station. So instead of calling it up on my cell phone, which involves click, click, touch, 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 touch to find it, I just say, Alexa, play WIQQ. Bam. Within 5 seconds, I've got WIQQ on. And I bought a second one from my office, and I listen to our news talk station when I'm not doing something else that requires listening to it. So yeah,
So we got really excited that audio, finally, video has had a lot of surfaces recently. Everyone's got video in their pocket, video in their devices,
right.
2 screens, second screening while you're watching television. This really is the first major step forward for audio in terms of its role in the home. Yeah. So we wanted to find ways to demonstrate to broadcasters and to encourage broadcasters to get on board with this and do something more than just the land grab of having your skill. Because I believe that there are 2 problems with the existing radio interface, and we call them friction and frustration. So friction is you're listening to your favorite call-in show and you're getting really angry about what they're talking about. So what do you have to do? You have to go to the website or wait for them to read out the number. You have to get your phone out of your pocket. You have to call. You have to wait for somebody to answer. And that moment, that moment that we said that radio creates of instant engagement, instant reaction is just kind of spoiled. Yeah. So what we can do now is, and we'll demonstrate in a minute, is you can shout at the radio and the station hears you. So people have been shouting at the radio for years. Now the studio can hear you directly when you shout at the radio. And the second thing is what I call frustration. So the radio studio has a lot of information that it can't give out all of the time. So you're right now talking to me as your guest. Probably half your listeners and viewers are wondering who I am. So if I'm on the radio several times, you'll say during the show, hey, today's guest is Dan McQuillan. Okay. But you don't know who wants that information and you don't know when they want it. And radios had no real surface area to do that. So now through the skill toolbox that we built, stations can quickly allow you to ask for information about artists, titles of songs, the program you're listening to, who the guest is, what's going on.
Wait, you mean like Alexa, what song is playing right now?
Yeah, and that's most radio skills have that, but we've gone beyond that to the program that's going, to the guest that's on, to news, weather, and travel information, to be able to express opinions about the song. Alexa, I hate this. Tell the studio I hate this, and we get sentiment information back that's context aware of the song that they're expressing the opinion on or about what's happening. So it creates a very natural, very fluid interface into which the consumer, the listener at home, can immediately express opinion, can immediately ask for more information, stating that kind of frustration about who is this? What was that? Who's even speaking? Who's the guest? Or why wait till travel on the ones? Why not just get travel or news when you want it by asking the appliance for it? Right. And ultimately, why not just yell at the radio and say, Kirk, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and it appears instantly in the studio. So we'll turn her on, or we'll unmute her. So In this case, we're talking to her just by the skill that we called the studio, which by knowing what we're listening to, or by the fact that we would normally be listening to this radio station. When I say the studio, that could be the name of your radio station, or it could be embedded into the player. So we're working with the likes of Radio Player to try and build this technology in so that whenever you're listening to Radio Player, our existing tools in the studio enlighten the skills toolbox we have on the web with all this extra metadata to know what to say and what to do.
So maybe not today, but in the future, whatever station I'm listening to, I could say, tell the studio, and it would tell that studio to which I was listening.
Yes, or as I say, what we've built is a toolbox that lets you add just a couple of lines of code to your skill. And then you can, it then uses our intelligent language engine, which is hosted out on the web. So it updates automatically as it learns from what it hears and as we add new capabilities to it. And just with those extra couple of lines at the end of your skill, then your skill is enabled to ask all these questions and to send messages through to the studio.
So that's available now then, absolutely.
We're launching this at IBC, so this is actually the first public demo. A few people in R&D departments have seen it. But if we say, Alexa, tell the studio I hate this, then she's going to go away.
I don't know that.
So she'll then respond to that. And there's a few different responses she'll make. So Alexa, tell the studio I love this.
Great. Thanks for the feedback.
So that's gone through as pure sentiment, and she knows what song I liked and that I passed it through.
So how does the studio find out that you said this?
That all appears inside the analytics within Phonebox, which is also bringing in that sentiment data you were talking about, where we're tracking social media, not just for what people are saying immediately, but the sentiment of how they react to the songs that you play and the information that's going on. So we're also then tracking the sentiment people express to the box. I can ask for more information. So if I say, Alexa, ask the studio for traffic and travel.
M3J9 westbound.
Alexa, stop. That's some local traffic and travel from where we are.
Okay.
And in that case, we've gone out and we've pulled that from the station's RSS feed, and she's verbalized it. We can also play a specific stream at that point. And the benefit is I can get custom information at the point that I want to get it, about news, about weather, and about travel. Critically, the language engine we've built understands radio concepts. So I could ask for travel news, traffic and travel, the latest travel headlines. There is no script for this. I can ask for news headlines and it will give me news. I can ask for headlines or travel news and it will understand the difference between those concepts. So it will learn as people request information, and it provides the most logical information. If I express a sentiment, it understands what I'm talking about and what that sentiment is. And if it doesn't know what I'm saying, I just pass it through as a message to the studio. So if I just say, Alexa, tell the studio shouting at the radio is fun.
Would you like me to tell the studio shouting at the radio is fun?
Yes. So we've confirmed
Message sent.
that we want to send that. And then we can see on our screens here that shouting at the radio is
Oh my goodness, there it is.
appeared instantly in the studio.
And can that tell you who said that or something about them?
Yes. So right now she's identified herself as Alexa because we haven't told the speaker who we are.
Okay.
So if I say, Alexa, tell the studio my name is Dan.
Nice to meet you, Dan.
So now she's greeted me as Dan.
Nice to meet you.
And now if I send another message, so if I say, Alexa, tell the studio this is really cool.
Would you like me to tell the studio this is really cool?
Yes.
Message sent.
Then this is really cool has come in.
Oh, there it
with
is.
some other social media, and
Yeah.
it's got Dan underneath.
So now the studio knows that Dan said this is really cool. All right, so let's say that we have a music station, but we're out of music at the moment. We're talking to an artist or a member of the band or somebody, and the announcer invites listeners with an Echo or a Google Home to ask questions via that. How would that work out?
Yeah, exactly. So whatever you ask will appear immediately in the studio, and then it comes alongside other social media. So here we're seeing it alongside Facebook posts, tweets, and so on. So yes, it makes it equal with all of that. As you saw, it's literally instant. As soon as we speak, it's on the screen.
Right.
We do get permission at the moment because we don't want people to have to say stuff and not realize it's going to be appearing in the studio. So at the moment, she would just ask you, would you like me to tell the studio this? And then once you've said yes, we're talking about tweet length kind of messages. You can't read, the entire works of Chaucer or Shakespeare or something into her, 8 seconds, 10 seconds or something. So it's really a case of saying, Kirk, this is ridiculous. Oh, you're making me so angry. But it's that moment. It's that instant. There is zero friction. You just yell at the radio, go, Alexa, tell the studio, this is ridiculous. And then it's gone. You don't have to look for the number. You don't have to reach for your phone. And so it's a way of not only hopefully gaining a better place for radio on these devices, but demonstrating the interactivity and the strength of radio, gamifying radio a little bit by enabling you to interact in new ways, and hopefully just encouraging radio to have a strong place on these, what I think will be important platforms.
So where does the voice to text occur at different stages in this process?
So all of the voice conversion to text occurs typically with these devices. The only thing the device recognizes is its own name.
Right.
And then on the cloud platform for either Amazon in the case of Alexa or Google Home, it's on the Google platform. They will convert that to text, which gets sent initially to your skill or to the TuneIn or Radio Player skill.
Okay.
And then any runt piece of text that you didn't know how to process gets sent up to our language engine.
Oh.
So what we've built is we call this is the Broadcast Phonics Smart Speaker Toolkit. So by empowering your skill with connection to the Smart Speaker Toolkit, then it enables all of this other information and interactivity. And it's about a handful of lines of code that you have to add to your skill, or if the platform your listeners are already using supports it, then you simply have to connect to your station. So
most radio stations don't have an engineer or an IT person that understands how to write the skill in the first place. They're often contracting. This has just become a thing. Yep. where your regular CDN or whoever writes your station's app anyway, they're now, a lot of them are offering, hey, we'll write your skill for Amazon Echo or Google Home. So if I contracted with Broadcast Phonics to add this to the skill, then what the developer that we normally use would simply add this, and it allows that developer to interact. In here, we've got all this broadcast technology. We've got playout systems which know what song's playing. We've got systems which know what show is on the air, who's on the telephone call, all of this other data. So we're enlightening our cloud with all of that information from the studio, and you don't have to redesign that into your skill. Every time we add new technology or we learn more about what people are asking for from your radio station, we update our cloud-based backend, and you don't have to rewrite your skill. So you write your skill once, add a couple of lines of code, and then all of this radio-specific intelligence, all of this interactivity, it simply drops in from our toolkit and cloud service. And as we extend that with different features, you can go to a portal and decide whether you want to enable that particular part of the skill to add travel to your service or add weather to your service, or add the ability to ask for additional artist information, go back and listen to bits of the show again. You can choose which of those features you want to enable for your skill. Eventually, someday, might it be possible for a listener to carry on a conversation on the air using their Amazon Echo?
Yes. So at the moment, something like an Echo can call another Echo, but essentially it's more or less a VoIP call, and it's using this as a pretty good hands-free phone.
Yeah.
So yes, when we're able to get Alexa to other device calling, absolutely, this is only the beginning of what we can do.
Yeah.
It's fun. People have been shouting at the radio for years, and now we can just pick it up instantly and silently in the studio. But it would be great to have that listener voice. And at the moment, I think Amazon and others have been deliberately cautious that they don't want to appear as if these devices are intruding in our personal spaces. They really don't want people to think that they're listening, the whole time. And so I think they're being very careful and cautious, quite rightly. But they've really caught on these devices because they've got this sense of personality. And so we've really tried to build that into the way that our skill reacts. It doesn't say the same thing over and over again. If you say you love something, it begins to use that same language. If you say you like something, you express negative, it apologizes. The way that it responds to you is kind of different every time, and the way that you ask for things can be naturally different every time. There's no right or wrong way of asking for something.
Yeah, some of these skills are pretty specific, and your part of the code, the runt part that Amazon doesn't understand, that hands off to you, you've got a pretty wide.
So we built a language engine, which is actually able to understand radio concepts and the basic semantic construct of the English language to know, Kirk asked a question, and in that he used these specific words. but you don't have to use them in a specific sequence. It understands well enough. Okay, you were asking for traffic and travel. You can ask for that in 100 different ways. You can, and they can be very subtly different from the way you might ask for news, and it will disambiguate between those two things. If you start yelling at it and expressing a question or a sentiment, it will decide whether it could understand that sentiment well enough to simply push it through and either say, "Oh, sorry, you don't like this song. Well, I'll let the studio know." Or whether it will say, "Hey, that's fantastic. Thanks for keep listening for more great music." That sort of response, and it's doing all of that on the fly from completely natural statements that you're just speaking to.
Hey, Chris Tobin at WBGO, that's your station, right? The jazz station.
Yes.
How would a jazz station? You have a lot of live shifts there. How would a jazz station put this kind of interactivity with the host to use?
Oh my goodness! This, as Dan was talking and describing the process, I was thinking of the various shows we have and the presenters and the conversations they have with the audience on the chat screens that we have and through email and messaging. I, as much as it would be fun to hear, I have a funny feeling we'd have a very opinionated audience, and they'd be saying a lot of crazy things. Shouting would definitely be a part of it. I think it's great. I think what Dan is presenting and showing, if I was a content creator or a programmer today, man, it is the best time to be doing it. And I still believe radio is still the better choice for audience engagement, social, everything about it. I think we need to wake up and realize there's more to it than what it used to be.
Yeah, and that's important, what Chris just said, in that a big part of my job for the last 4 or 5 years has been going around exactly meeting with programmers, meeting with producers, meeting with presenters, and demonstrating what I've spoken to Kirk, I think, on TWiRT once before, about what I call the creative conspiracy, which is that radio, when it was at its greatest, was a conspiracy between talented engineers and talented creatives. And for a long time, I think engineers have simply been tasked with just building digital versions of the same studios they've always built, of just keeping the show on the air. And actually, radio is at its strongest when the technologists actually become part of the creative process, when we're able to say, "Hey, I can empower your show to have this new mechanic, to have this new interactivity, to reach these new audiences." It's quite a big communication task, because sometimes the talent doesn't quite know what they're reaching for, what they're asking for, and sometimes the engineer is either busy keeping the transmitter on the air or the console free from Coca-Cola that's been spilt. And we're trying to encourage producers and presenters to really consider how they can use these new platforms and new technology, and for the listeners and viewers of TWiRT to understand that actually radio engineering has this exciting new opportunity to really embrace all of these platforms. And it's not something external, it's the digital department. This is all broadcast technology designed to sit in radio studios, not to distract from what's happening on air. As a company, we really believe in the simplicity and the immediacy of radio's workflow. We really don't want to break that. You walk into a studio, you open the microphone, and all the rest of this stuff just happens. The messages just appear, the shouted messages just appear, the sentiment just arrives, the recordings and video all happens, and there's nothing you have to do to feed all of this stuff. In fact, it empowers you by delivering better content to you. So as the talent, you've just got all this extra information, all this extra stimulus, all this content, and all this. How did you used to know what you were doing on the radio, right? The calls just lit up. Now we can tell you in real time, second by second, song by song, how the mood of your audience is changing, how they're reacting to the artists, how they react to the topic that you're talking about, when to change topic, when to stick where you are, highlighting questions to read to specific guests. All of that stuff is empowering you to make better radio.
We're going to take a quick break for an ad, but when we come back from the ad, Dan, one thing, we do have a lot of engineers in our audience. That's the bulk of the audience. I'd like for you to just give us a little shopping list of what moving parts it takes to make happen what we just saw. So an engineer, the programmer says, "Hey, we just got this thing from Broadcast Bionics that's going to do this." What's an engineer going to be expected to have to install or do or arrange? So we'll get to that in just a minute. You're going to help me do the next ad.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry I didn't tell you about that.
No.
Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at the Telos Alliance, and specifically, I want to tell you about Zipstream software, Zipstream X2 and Zipstream 9X2. Now, that is audio processing and stream encoding software that runs on your PC, runs in Windows, anything from Windows 7, 8, 10, may even run on XP. I'm not sure. Anyway, you probably don't have XP anyway. Hope you don't. And I use this software at my stations. We've got radio stations in Mississippi and in American Samoa. Use the software all the time. And I got to tell you, it's so easy to install. It comes with LiveWire drivers. If you use LiveWire, if you don't use LiveWire, that's okay too. You can use any sound card, single input or multi-input, whatever wave device is available, you can use it. And you license the software per input. But for each input, you can create multiple outputs. If you just want to do audio processing, let's say you want to take one of your stations and audio process it and send it right back out the sound card, so it's your music on hold on your phone system, but it's processed. You can do that. But if you want to make an MP3 stream, different bit rates. If you want to make an AAC stream, if you want to make an HEAAC V2 stream, or even if you want to do the newest streaming, XHEAAC, that can go down to 16 kilobits and still sound, well, reasonable. If you need to go through a tunnel and your bit rate is really low, when you're mobile, you can do that. You can make as many streams as your CPU will handle. From just one licensed input. Now, Dan and I were in his car a little while ago. We just came back from dinner, and he was demonstrating the Apple, what was it called? CarPlay. Yeah. And then we also I wanted to hear the streaming capabilities built into the car. So we used the TuneIn app, right? And so I have a couple radio stations in American Samoa. We're using the Zipstream 9X2 software, although we're just running the X2 right now. We got a really weak computer running it. And so we're just using the simple 3-band processing. Dan, when I tuned in to our station, well, after the 6-minute spot set was over, what did you think about the audio?
It was incredible. I mean, we were sat in my car in an area with really bad mobile reception.
Oh, yeah, half a bar.
Just one half of a bar,
yeah.
Having just been listening to DAB and allegedly the state of the art. And it had punch, it had vibrancy, it was perfectly not just clear, but actually a really, a non-fatiguing listen.
Yeah.
And so I'm now going to be listening to American Samoan radio on my way because I don't know how to change it.
We've got another listener.
But so the connected car is a big thing, but actually this is all about getting the right encoding, getting the right processing, and making something which is really easy for you to transmit, but is really, really a high quality listen at the other end.
Yeah, and I was surprised. Well, normally I listen to my own stations on one of those, and it sounds fine, but you really can't tell the deep bass. You can't tell the sparkly highs. You hear what comes out that speaker, which is okay for entertainment, but not much for quality checking, right? So tonight I got to hear it. What are you driving, a Volvo?
Yeah. It's
an amazing electric hybrid Volvo, and the speaker system is it a name brand speaker system?
I think it's Harman Kardon.
Okay, well, it sounded fantastic. We cranked that thing up, and oh man, it sounded great. And we're just streaming HEAAC at 48 kilobits per second. So and by the way, getting that signal off of American Samoa, that's a trick anyway, because there's not a lot of bandwidth there. So we're streaming back to the States, 48 kilobits, where it goes to a CDN and gets distributed to anybody that wants to listen. Well, we do this all with the Telos Zipstream X2 software. And I got to tell you, it's been a joy to use. It does metadata. It's got all kinds of filters. It's got a metadata engine built into it. So if you want to do metadata, you've got lots of options for getting it in there, parsing it correctly, getting the right things to show up on the screen when the metadata is running. We actually do streaming for 2 stations on the same computer, because I'm using a LiveWire driver there. Our whole station in Samoa is LiveWire. And so we took a really cheap, not even refurbished, an old computer, wiped it clean, put Windows 7 on it, put the Zipstream software on there, bring in our audio via LiveWire, which just involves a little bit of typing, and bam, it's there. And then I set up the audio processing, just picked a preset I liked, didn't even have to adjust it, set up my streams with where they go to the CDN, and hit play, and bam, it goes. And we just absolutely love it. I do the same thing at my other stations in Greenville, Mississippi, Indianola, Mississippi, Greenwood, Mississippi, and Cleveland, Mississippi. And I point out these small stations for one reason to you. If it's this easy and works and sounds this good for your small station, your small market station, it works great for medium and large markets too. We got stations in the biggest markets using the exact same software and the exact same audio processing. Check it out if you would. Go to telosalliance.com and look for Zipstream software We also have hardware to run your streams too, but today I'm talking about the ZipStream X2 software. Thanks a lot, Telos, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Okay, Dan, we're ready with some demo here, yeah?
So we have a number of different kind of systems which are involved in what we've been looking at.
Yeah.
So we started with the whole concept of talk show. So, the call-in radio show, as I say, that is still kind of the gold standard of what's going on. And so we started with what we called Phonebox, which was the call-in part of the product.
In fact, our producer, if you want to go ahead and if you can take that screen and show that, we'll be talking about that for just a minute. This phone box
so
screen.
here we can see some telephone lines and we can see some social media information, and all that information is managed through a single interface. So the whole concept now is you really should only need two screens in the studio. You should have a single screen, which is for your audio or your playout or your newsroom system if you're a speech station, and a screen which is being used for everything else. So that's live reads, contests, social media, telephone calls, Skype, all of that sort of stuff. So in a typical setup, you'll have one screen, which is the one we have up there in the top left, which is making a noise, and this one down here. Seems like the Skype is out of date on your screen there. That's not the same as what I'm looking at here. Anyway, maybe there's just some sort of delay. So if we come back to us, I will try and zoom us in a little bit, and we will have a look at the screen in front of us. So I can see here social media that's appearing, and I can take my Alexa messages and my tweets and so on, and I can sequence them together. One of the things which we've added at NAB and are launching in the rest of the world here at IBC is the ability to use Skype. So again, we've increasingly discovered that the BBC now, about 50% of their contribution that's not coming from the studio is coming in over Skype or possibly FaceTime. So here we can see that we have direct integration into the Phonebox interface of not just the Skype codec and Skype calls, but things like managing the Skype directory, managing search of contacts, and the ability for the first time to show multiple, high density numbers of Skype channels.
Wait a minute. So this is the same software that can handle phone calls, say from a Telos VX system, but can also handle Skype phone calls.
Exactly.
So, okay. All right. So a station could take either one and they mix and match perfectly on the screen.
Yes, and we're not turning them into SIP calls. This really is the Skype engine developed between us and Microsoft in the specifics. So Phonebox is the talk show platform, and then this is what we and Microsoft call Skype TX for radio, which is the very dense version of Skype designed for high channel count of audio only content. Gotcha. So each Skype TX for radio engine can generate 14 channels of Skype, and it can do that from a single Skype account. So if you are Mr. Kirk on Skype, then as people connect to your account, you'll see the first person who connects ring as line 1, the second as line 2, the third as line 3. So it turns a single Skype account into a 14-line talk show system of HD quality Skype calls. And the system is tracking not just the directory information, but as we call out to a call, we can also see things like the call quality of the service. So we can see
the green dot there. Okay,
demonstrating, and then through that, if we start to see a problem with it, we'll warn you about that. So it sounds really great. It sounds much better than telephone quality audio, and it gives you something which is between contribution grade through maybe a dedicated codec and a standard telephone call. And it means you can create whole new contest mechanics, whole new talk show mechanics via Skype for traditional broadcasters. But if you're a non-traditional web broadcaster, you no longer need 14 telephone lines to do a 14 call-in show. You could do it from your hotel room with decent bandwidth. You now have a multi-line talk show wherever you go.
Now, depending on your station's format, your listeners may or may not be Skype users. Certainly everyone can be a telephone user, but it seems like your younger audience may very well not be a phone user, even though they have a phone. I almost can never get my wife's daughter on the phone.
No.
But if I text her, no problem.
It's one of the reasons why we started to move away. Talk shows love the live caller, but it's just not a habit for some people.
Yes.
And so this is an application that virtually everybody has on their phone, or everybody has access to a device that you can very easily download this codec or this way of connecting to the radio station.
Right.
It gives you higher quality calls, it gives you free calls, and it gives you those calls internationally. So people like Voice of America or BBC World Service, who presently have to give out a huge number of international numbers, well, now this gives a single global free point of access to communicate directly with those kind of formats. Okay,
so it looks like your Skype calls, your regular phone calls, and then you have the ability to bring in the sentiment, the social interactions. Yeah.
Exactly. So social media is being analyzed in here, and I can see the volume of social interaction. I can see the sentiment of, how people are listening and reacting. I can see that not just by time, but I can see when it's linked with the playout system, I can see here what songs are playing as that changed.
Okay.
And we use this for good and for evil. So if you are a music station, we try to keep you, this is BBC Radio 1, which is a dance format station, and they're doing exactly what we would expect. A music station should be around about 20% happy. And right now they're trending 20 to just above 20, nearly 25% happy there. So that's really quite good for a music station. And I can see down here the words people are overusing. So they're overusing kind, favorite, amazing, love, and beautiful. So, people are having a very, very positive experience right now. And these are the negative words, but by a much lower factor that they're using. So worst, hell, lost. So I can see down here, maybe actually they've played a song called Worst Hell. And therefore it's actually, that's not
thumbs down on Worst Hell. Okay.
Negative. So I can see what's going on. The way people can use this for evil is if you're a speech station, what you want to do is keep people with maximum strength of feeling.
Oh.
So actually we see they want to trend this sentiment down every time they change topic, because people start to get angry and they start to get emotionally engaged, and they use angry expressions. And then as people over time, so every time you change topic to a new emotionally charged one, the sentiment should drop rapidly. And then as people start to normalize to what you're talking about, actually the sentiment will start to track upwards.
Wow.
And that gives you some idea of when you should change the topic, or when you should maybe change the caller, or when you should move on. So while the original intention of this was to allow people to understand the music and the content people liked, you can also use it to actually keep the audience engaged, or really understand how the audience is reacting. There's very different tools for different kinds of radio stations.
Sure.
You have a few hundred or a few thousand listeners, then you should be looking at reacting and responding to every message that hits the studio. You have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of listeners. Social media became a problem because there was so much of it hitting you, you didn't know what to do with it. We let you take it and then pull it apart and analyze it, and in an aggregate say, okay, your audience is liking this, or they're not liking it. You have Justin Bieber walk in the studio, you will have hundreds of thousands of people say, I love you, Justin. That's meaningless. We can take that away and say, okay, actually, here are the 10 questions that your audience want to ask Justin Bieber. And that way, all 100,000 people will feel they've had their message listened to, even though all you've really done is say, actually, I think there are 10 questions you should ask him.
So Dan is explaining phone box as, I take it, the first in the laundry list of things that it takes to make the Echo do what you just demonstrated.
Yeah, so Echo can work on its own, and we can inform it from just any playout systems now playing data.
Right.
But we use Phonebox as also the surface where the messages that you shout at the radio appear.
Come back. Yeah.
So here's alongside the rest of the social media stuff.
Okay.
And that's what we call it. It was originally a code name, and it's turned into the product, which was Oasis, or the on-air social interaction server. And that's the back end that Phonebox uses to connect and aggregate all of these different Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, and so on, so that when you log in, you just say, I'm doing the breakfast show on Q107, and it goes, oh, okay, you have these 4 Facebook pages, these multiple Twitter pages, you stream to this YouTube live account. Then somebody comes in and does a different show, networked maybe to different stations, and the computer automatically knows how to aggregate, how to share, what accounts you need.
So I'm an engineer, and I'm making my shopping list here. So I've got to have, I should, to do what you did, and to have the talent see this data come back, I need Phonebox, I need Oasis,
and the smart speaker toolkit, and that's
and
all
the smart speaker
need.
toolkit.
Yeah.
Really, that's it. Those things. Okay. Now we haven't talked about video yet on any of that, but that to get the interaction that you were just saying, that's now to get the smart speaker toolkit. Isn't there some kind of service that you offer that figures out what people are saying beyond what?
Yeah, so the smart speaker toolkit is the first time we're actually hosting something in the cloud, which offers that just purely as a service. So people simply sign up for the smart speaker toolkit. We provide them with some data that they'll need to put into their app, or how to connect their skill or their provider's skill with our services. A little key that means we can identify them when their stream is being played. And then the rest of it is just managed through the cloud. So it's not something that you actually have running locally in the studio. The messages just appear alongside, or identified differently, but you can do everything with them as if they'd come in via regular social.
So at a station, if I'm going to set this up at my station, sounds like I'm running a couple different computers. One for Oasis.
In the studio, there's all one interface. So we really don't want too many computers in the studio. So there's one client which is handling all of this stuff. So if you're doing the video switching, you use that as your video switcher. You use it as your video editor and your playback and your sharing and your streaming. just one screen in the studio. You may, in the closet down the street, if you're a larger station, you may have a server which is then actually powering all of this. So you can run all of this for a small station on a single PC. Typically, people will have maybe one server handling all of the database and the comms for this, and a large national group may have a separate server for each service, and they may even have resilient servers in a cluster or in multiple locations to to keep everything running 24/7.
Hey, Chris, before we move on to a little bit of talk about video, and we're going to have to wrap that up pretty quickly. Chris, you got any comments right now before we move on to that video subject?
No. You guys you touched on everything. I mean, it's unbelievable what you can do, and I think Dan's group has put it very nicely together. And as he pointed out, keeping the parts count, if you will, in the studio to a minimum, but very functional. I like the workflow. It's perfect.
So, Dan, we could do a couple of shows on video. You introduced us some years ago, but to capture the video you were talking about earlier, you get a guest in the studio. And you mentioned that some stations will, hey, we know we got a big guest coming in. Let's bring one of our camera guys in to record the interaction. But sometimes the best interactions happen without previously notifying the camera guy, right? That you may have, or if you got a caller that has as you mentioned, an emotional story and it gets everybody choked up, or a happy story that gets everybody excited, then you want to capture that, as you said, automatically. Just kind of give us the quick elevator speech about integrating the visuals into this. And I'm speaking from the engineer's point of view. How does the engineer make this happen?
So the couple of important things. One, we don't want to break the workflow of radio. It needs to be simple, it needs to be fast, it needs to be immediate, and we don't want to change what you're doing in the studio, because if you over visualize radio, people actually change the way they behave. If the cameras are too obvious, they start to play with the cameras. Political guests even are very different. A political guest on a TV show reacts very differently from a radio show. They tend to relax more. So you'll see here, you can't see them at home, but we're using these very small Panasonic cameras. They're actually very cheap. They're about $1,000. But they can shoot 10 shots. So while we're in shot here, I can actually jump our little shot around. So if I want to go back and move that out, it's actually a very wide angle shot.
That's the same camera. Same camera, 2 shots.
So I can zoom that in, and then we have a close up of the two of us. Without having to switch away, I can jump that camera to 10 different positions around this studio. So first of all, you need less cameras, and it's a 4K camera that we can jump in the software to these different positions. So a small number of cameras. And we don't want you to have to learn a whole lot of video editing techniques and expressions and everything else. We really want you to only have to understand the radio workflow and radio language. So everything is done inside the existing radio tools. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that as we edit things, so I'm just going to bring this back up into the video edit window. So everything I do comes through the audio automatically. So I don't have to switch cameras. It knows who's speaking and it will switch to the correct camera position.
Right. And that's a benefit of Livewire, where you have separate channels for everybody anyway. We can detect which mic is the loudest.
So exactly. So we pull all this information over IP from the network. And as you'll see, as we'll tease your followers in a minute right at the end, we can do an awful lot of information based on what's on that Livewire network. Everything is on the wire. We can use that not just to switch video, but to do all sorts of other kind of detection. One
Ethernet cable brought into the computer that figures all this out is all you need, right?
Yes.
Because that can bring in all the channels that determines all the camera switching.
Yeah. So it's actually not audio, if you like, doing this. It's really just data which is on the network. And then I can, if I want, manually switch cameras. So I can override the computer. I can put it into auto switch, and then it's able to automatically switch between the cameras based on the audio. I can put it into manual, and then I can touch the cameras, and then I can reposition the cameras manually by clicking on setup. So once it's set, I click auto, I click live stream if I want to go live, and then I have here my YouTube live and Facebook live account, and I could just hit connect, and we'd be streaming.
Right.
And that's it. So in the studio, I don't have to learn how the cameras work. I don't have to worry about framing the shots. I don't have to do anything except open the mic and speak. But at that point, I've then automatically had all of those links properly recorded. So again, I don't have to remember. As long as we're set up, the media is available to me for the show today.
And of course, part of the idea is to maybe put an interaction, an interesting one, on social media right after it happens. But you could also do this after your whole show's over. You can do it later in the day, right? Doesn't have to go on social media right now.
Yeah, so we find people will use this tech for really 2 reasons. One is an archive of the show to put the best bits out later in the day, or to find other packages. but also to share stuff immediately when it happened. Quite a lot of stations who can put social out, it might take them 3 or 4 hours to actually get the information from the shots, to find somebody to edit it, to re-encode it, to put it up. So we wanted to shorten that as absolutely as much as possible. So before the next song is finished playing, the best bits of the last link that you did can be up online.
Wow. We'll probably get another demo of this at the IBC show, which starts in how many days?
I don't know. It starts
next
about
week.
the 14th or something.
Yeah. So we'll be interviewing Dan, and we're going to be out of time here, Dan. But the other thing that you'll show us, we'll have to do a video about it, is this editing based on what was said. What do you call that?
So we have a transcription service from Speechmatics, which means that when all of those videos that we record, we suddenly realize we have audio and video inside them. So what we wanted to do was to take the audio track and transcribe that. And it's transcribed in a time accurate way. So when I'm looking at the transcription, I actually have access to not just what was said, but when it was said. So I can click on an individual word like banana, and it will jump instantly to that. And I can say, okay, set the in point to this piece of text, set the out point to that piece of text, and make a video cut simply based on the content. And
I saw you demo this before. If you're watching the show, you need to watch for the demo that we do at IBC, where you are editing not by waveform, although you can. You're editing by grabbing, I want when this guy said this to here, to this, from this in point to this out point, and say, that's what I want. And bam, you've got that video clip, an audio clip together.
Yeah, so this is one of our concepts, and you'll see us using this again and again now in different products that we have, is that really the best part of radio content is not a wiggly waveform. It's not a noise. It's words. Radio is a spoken document.
Right.
So we're really passionate about making the spoken document that's radio fully searchable. So you can search for radio in Google. You can search for the content locked inside radio through YouTube and other surfaces. So we're extracting the most compelling and original content of radio, which is not a squiggly waveform. It's the words that are embedded inside what we do, and making that fully searchable, fully discoverable across all these platforms.
Awesome. We're going to have to wrap things up pretty soon. We're going to have a tip of the week. So if you can think of a tip while I'm doing this ad, that would be terrific. And Chris Tobin always has a great tip as well. So Chris, I'm counting on you here in just a minute. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by our friends at Lavo, L-A-W-O, at lavo.com/TWiRT. Be sure you put the /TWiRT on there. That way they know that I sent you over here. And Lavo is famous for making these great big audio consoles. But hey, we're in radio. We don't have such big consoles typically. And so Lavo has a complete line of radio consoles that are sized for radio. And they have a number of different form factors, different whole ideas of working. Of course, they have small consoles that look pretty traditional. They have faders and on and off buttons, but they also have virtual radio. This is where, like the crystal clear console we talked about quite a bit in the last year or so, where you get a touch screen, a multi-touch touchscreen to control your audio. It has auto mix. It has auto leveling, so you can set the level automatically. You don't have to reach up and grab a trim knob. You just push a button and the level is set. Plus, Lavo does audio routing systems based on Ravenna, which is compatible with AES67. So you've got a lot of cross-brand compatibility there with the Lavo Ravenna system. Then another product they've come out with is Relay. This is like a radio station in a bag, in a backpack, where you can integrate a bunch of different features, mixing, audio processing, telephone hybrids, and some audio processing, all into a single a computer that you're taking around, and put your headsets in there, your mics, and have a radio station that you can actually take with you. Relay. The next cool thing is something they introduced just 1 year ago at the IBC show. It's Ruby. What's Ruby? Well, it's a new way of thinking about radio workflow, where physical and on-screen multi-touch controls combine to give your on-air talent a new way to create. Now, I know there's some big idea words there. Check it out. If you're going to be at IBC, then come check out the Ruby console at the Lavo booth. So all these technologies, all these features that are built into Lavo, really cool. And some of the biggest broadcasters in the world, like the CBC in Canada and NPR in Washington, D.C., they are Lavo users. So are some huge venues too. So I mean, if you've got to do the Olympics, if you need to do television audio for the World Cup, you're going to be using a Lavo console. They are built like you just wouldn't believe. Backups upon backups and incredible reliability. So check it out at Lavo. Go to Lavo, LAWO.com/TWiRT. TWiRT, TWiRT. That's the name of this show. And it'll take you right to the radio on-air page that you see on your screen right now. Thanks a lot, Lavo, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Chris Tobin, you always have a tip of the week for us. No exception this week. What you got for us, buddy?
Well, we're talking about the workflow and all the new advances and the fact that the radio station studios are very different today than they were 10 years ago, and it's time to learn something new. So my tip would be, for those of you in the broadcast engineering sector, it's time to learn what's going on in programming and marketing at your radio station. So it's time to start talking to the PD, learn more about what's happening, so that when you get that call that somebody sold the radio owner, the corporate group, the corporate programmer, this product from some company called Broadcast Bionics, you'll already be 2 steps ahead of the game. Because I'm telling you right now, after listening to Dan's description, and I know from the product and many trade shows, watching and talking to his folks, if you can't make this work and generate revenue, then you should just take a job flipping burgers somewhere, because this thing taps your inner, inner child. If you really pay attention to social and curation of whatever product you're doing, whether it be music or spoken word at your radio station, these products from Broadcast Bionics definitely tap into that spot that 20 years ago we used to do with Arbitron diaries and all the wacky methodologies to try and game the system for diary work. This is perfect. I love the fact that you can use that, whether it's the Google product or the Amazon product, a tabletop cylinder, and the fact that you can yell at the radio and get a response. The instant response works 2 ways. Not only does the audience member, the listener, get to say something to the radio and actually get feedback, but we as broadcasters now are talking to somebody. Whereas before it used to be one way. Now it's 2 way. So I think the tip from me would be learn this stuff. I mean, I've been doing it for years, but it's about the workflow. Transmitters are transmitters. Studios are studios. You want to put in a Lavo console, put Ethernet connectivity between rooms, that's great. Learn how to excel on that, how to go beyond to the next level. Dan's product definitely gets you started. So my tip is learn how to talk to the other guys in the building. It's time to start crossing the aisle.
Chris, I would add an exclamation point on your tip. And luckily, a lot of this tech that broadcast engineers need to learn something about is inexpensive. So, I mean, years ago, if you wanted to learn how a spectrum analyzer worked and get some experience with one, you might have to do what I did years ago, 25 years ago, which is buy a $10,000 spectrum analyzer. And that was a big outlay. But nowadays, I've gone through 20 internet routers in 15 years at my house. Why? Because I was really curious about how routers work. And everyone's got a little bit different user interface. So, I went through a bunch of routers, and I'm delightfully happy with my MikroTik router now, but learn by buying, learn by doing. And the same thing with the Amazon Echo and the Echo Dot. I just bought an Echo Dot. It was actually a refurbished one. It was a return, and I got it for $39. And so now I get to experiment right there at my office, right next to my keyboard. I can play with it if I read about a new skill or something that I need to know about. How does this work? $39. I've got it right there to play with. So thanks for that great tip. Engineers, up your game and learn about this tech. It's fun, and it's not very expensive either to play with it. Dan, you probably have a tip for us as well. Yeah, job security. That's right.
Well, yeah, I mean, he I guess Chris stole my tip in one sense, in that it really is about a creative conspiracy. So, I really am passionate that, radio's about that conspiracy between engineering and production. And, I think we've lost that. I really believe that over the last 20 years, the most creative people in radio were the accountants. And, they're the people who've pushed technology the furthest. They've said, how can we use technology to save money? Yeah. And the technology has to be affordable. And all of this stuff, I mean, a lot of the platforms, all the systems we're talking about are actually incredibly good value or free. So we're talking about saying, actually, how can we use technology not just to save money, but to actually produce compelling content, to get that content onto the platforms which people are going to consume them in, make it searchable and discoverable. And we do that by engineers and creatives really working together. And so, the creatives are a little worried that we're just trying to automate them and get rid of them. And I think we need to say that's not what this is about. This is about making more compelling, more original radio. And the engineers, perhaps we need to stop thinking that the talent just breaks things and understand that only when we really start conspiring and we start working together will we have a new golden age of radio.
I love how you're saying talent can do what they're best at, and almost automatically we're getting it out to a much wider audience and using it So that, hey, if I'm doing this show, I'd rather have 10,000 listeners and viewers than 10 viewers, right? And so, yeah, getting it out there by the means that you're
And
enabling.
however many listeners you have, I met somebody at NAB who looked at all this and said, well, I don't need this because I already have 10 million listeners. Congratulations on having 10 million listeners. But what he could have had was 10 million evangelists, 10 million people sharing that. And by now he could have 30 million listeners or hundreds of millions of views of those clips. So if you're a larger radio station, you can really use that audience to reach even further and to understand what's going on. Or if you're the smallest niche radio station, then it's even more important because that niche will help you to find more people in that niche.
Sure.
So if it's just people who like knitting, fishing, and jazz, if that's your niche, then online those people will share content between other people who like knitting, fishing, and jazz, and your station will naturally kind of find its reach. So it's a really powerful force. And please, please, please don't think I'm trying to break radio. Don't think that we're trying to change radio. Everything we're trying to do here is to help you make better radio content and to get that audience as large as possible by sharing and discovering on these new platforms.
Hey, in the show notes, I want to put links to a station or two that really use this tech to its fullest. So that'll be in the show notes. Good reason to go to the website, thisweekinradiotech.com, when the show is posted in a couple of days, and read the show notes. We got to go. Dan, thanks so much.
Pleasure, sir.
Dan McQuillan, Broadcast Bionics. The website is bionics.co.uk.
Correct.
All right, bionics.co.uk, represented around the world by different dealers. And Chris Tobin, thank you so much for being with us from WBGO in Newark.
Absolutely. My pleasure. It was great to see you guys, and have a good time and travel safe, Kirk.
All right. Thanks so much. And thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week. And Suncast, we want to thank Suncast for producing the show. Also, Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. I'm Kirk Harnack on This Week in Radio Tech. We'll see you next week.